It's a play guide and primer for Ulalek, Fused ATROCITY, the new Eldrazi commander from Modern Horizons 3. He's absolutely as crazy as you've heard. He's a 2/5 for 5, which can be paid with hybrid, either colorless or Wooburg in any combination. And he has the text of, whenever you cast an Eldrazi spell, you may pay colorless. If you do, copy all spells you control, then copy all other activated and triggered abilities you control, and you may choose new targets for the copies. So this is a little, not a little, a lot difficult to understand, and this is not a deck for new players or those without a very firm grasp of game mechanics, stack interaction, Magic rules in general. You will not be able to play this deck optimally or even come close to it if you aren't a pretty solid player like in the first place. So just warning in advance, like, this is not a deck for beginners. You certainly could play it if you're a beginner and like you're gonna do fine, but you will come nowhere close to optimizing how this works. So let me get into a little bit of explanation of like what this does and how you might use it. So the most important thing to know first off is that you really need like instant speed to trigger this. So for example, like if you put a spell on the stack, let's say you cast a Wastegate Battle Mage, right, which is an Eldrazi wizard, so it is an Eldrazi, it will trigger Ulalek. And when you cast this, whether you pay the kicker or not is not really relevant. We're not going to focus on that. In fact, let's just talk about a non-kicker card just to make it easier. So let's say this Chittering Dispatcher. So what happens is you'll put this on the stack and Ulalek will trigger, right? So this is on the stack. Any triggers that are created when you cast it go on the stack, and then the Ulalek trigger will go on the stack. And it says, okay, you cast an Eldrazi. Do you want to pay colorless? Let's say you say, yes, I do. In which case you get a copy of the Chittering Dispatcher that goes on the stack. You also get a copy of anything else that was on the stack at that time. So, for example, like let's say you had let's use Up the Beanstalk as an example. So let's say you've got an Up the Beanstalk in play, right? And you cast a 5 mana or more Eldrazi. Let's use this Null Drifter as an example, actually. So when you cast this spell, you draw 2 cards, and it's got Flying and Annihilator 1. Okay? So let's take the example of you put this Null Drifter on the stack, and you get this cast trigger right away that says, alright, you cast this spell, you draw 2 cards, right? So that goes on the stack. And then also, Ulalek's trigger goes on the stack and says, hey, do you want to pay 2 and copy everything? But you've also got an Up the Beanstalk in play, right? So like, let's say this goes on the stack as well. This says, hey, you cast a creature with mana value 5 or greater, draw a card. So all these things go on the stack, whatever triggered abilities you have in play. And then any you want to put on the stack in addition in response to Ulalek's trigger. The only problem is, like, the Ulalek trigger is going to go on the stack right away. So if you cast, let's say you like cast your Null Drifter and you get your Up the Beanstalk trigger that goes on the stack. You get to order, so if, like, all of the triggers that you have in play that are going to trigger on cast will go on the stack in whatever order you choose. So for the stuff that's already in play, you can go ahead and choose to stack it in the way that's going to advantage you the most, meaning like you're going to put the Null Drifter trigger on the stack first, and then you're going to put the Up the Beanstalk trigger, and then you're going to put the Ulalek trigger, so that when you decide to say, yes, I'm paying colorless for the Ulalek trigger, it copies the Up the Beanstalk and the Null Drifter. So what Ulalek does not allow you to do is to cast anything, instant speed or otherwise, in response to his trigger. So like, basically, like, you have to have whatever you want to get copied on the stack before you cast your Eldrazi spell and create the Ulalek trigger. You cannot, for example, cast Null Drifter, which will create the Ulalek trigger right away. Like we talked about earlier, it's going to create 3 triggers, right? You're going to cast the spell, you're going to get a cast trigger, draw 2. You're going to get an Up the Beanstalk trigger to draw. and then you're in an Ulalek trigger because you cast an Eldrazi. You cannot like weave in a Vampiric Tutor, for example. You can't hold priority and say like, okay, like I cast the Null Drifter, but before the Ulalek trigger happens, or like before it resolves, I also cast a Vampiric Tutor. That is not going to work the way you want it to and get the Vampiric Tutor copied, because the Ulalek trigger will always exist before you're able to cast the Vampiric Tutor. So you can cast the Vampiric Tutor, but it's going to resolve first, and then the Ulalek trigger will resolve and the Vampiric Tutor is gone. So what does that mean? Like, how do we take advantage of this in the way that benefits us the most? The answer is we cast the Eldrazi spell that creates the Ulalek trigger as late as possible, and we put all the things we want to get on the stack onto the stack first, and then cast the Eldrazi spell. And really the only way to facilitate that is with flash speed, because otherwise, like, you can really only copy the one non-flash speed thing that you're casting, which is still good, don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, that's still going to work. Casting a Void Winner and paying the 2 and copying it, and copying all of your cast triggers, call it like Kozilek's Unsealing, up to Beanstalk, whatever you want, all the stuff that triggers from cast, like, that's great. I mean, casting a Flare of the Loyalties and doubling this cast trigger to gain control of 2 creatures, like, still excellent, right? But if you want to talk really broken, then we start to look at, well, how do we give our Eldrazi spells flash? So, or, what Eldrazi instants are available to us. So, I mean, let's talk about that first, because, like, there's one that comes in the precons, Eldritch Immunity. It's a Kindred spell, so it does count as an Eldrazi, and it's a 1-mana instant that gives a creature you control protection from each color till end of turn. So, normally I would say that, especially in a 5-color deck that's a power level 8, like, very strong deck, the spell is not good enough, in my opinion. Even with the Overload, like, this is a decent protection spell, but, like, we're in 5-color, there's tons of better options. However, being a 1-mana Eldrazi instant, inherently, without having any other pieces required, makes this very powerful, as long as you, like, consider it and use it that way. Of course, you can use it for its protection aspect if you need to. It's, in fact, like, one of the things that makes the spell good in this deck is it has flexibility. You can almost think of it as a modal spell, right? You can use it to give a creature protection, you can overload to give your board protection if someone's blasphemous acting, for example. But in general, like, this sort of effect, first of all, this is overcosted because it's colorless. And second of all, it doesn't protect from so many of the things that you actually want to protect from. Toxic Deluge, Wrath of God, or Vanquish the Horde. Like, protection doesn't help against these things because, for those of you who don't know, protection stops against, or the way to remember what protection does is the acronym DEBT. Like, you're in debt, you didn't have enough money to pay your bills, now you're in debt. D for damage, E is for enchantment and equipment, B is for blocking, and T is for targeting. Those are the things that protection will stop. So, a Blasphemous Act, right? That's going to do 13 damage to each creature. Does that fit the acronym? Yes, it's dealing damage. Protection will stop that. Okay? Wrath of God, destroy all creatures. Is that doing damage, enchantment, equipment, blocking, or targeting? None of those things, right? It's just a destroy effect, and it's non-targeted. Therefore, protection doesn't stop against it. Minus effects are even worse. Unless they're targeted, again, it's not going to stop that. But that also gets through something like Indestructible. So anyway, long story short, this spell, I would normally cut it from a deck like this, because although, like, some people think it's good, I feel like there's just tons of better options, like Teferi's Protection, Clever Concealment. Like, there are better options out there. That all being said, this is a 1-mana Eldrazi instant, so what does this allow us to do? Well, we can cast as many instant speed things as we want, non-Eldrazi things. So Ulalek copies all spells you control, not just Eldrazi. Eldrazi is just the only way to trigger this ability. So let's say I had all 12 of these instants in my hand, and there are targets for all of them. Like, I could cast all of these, put them all in the stack, and then lastly cast my Eldritch Immunity, and then boom, Ulalek trigger, I pay the 2, all of these get copied, along with any other cast triggers and any other things that you have that exist on the stack. So having Flash in this deck is very powerful, and that's why we're running a subpar protection spell like Eldritch Immunity, because basically it says 1 colorless plus 2 colorless, so 3 colorless, copy all spells and abilities that you control that are on the stack right now, which is extremely powerful. How else do we kind of cheat this ability, and like what is this deck trying to do? So really this is an Eldrazi deck at heart, so we're playing a lot of the top end Eldrazi. I'll go through a few of them, but I think you all know what Eldrazi do, and like I think you're probably here to see more about like how does this deck work, how does it win, how do I like deal with these triggers. This is the kind of thing I like to talk about and why I think this is such a cool deck. So what are we doing? We're looking to ramp quickly. Duh. Every deck's trying to do that. This is a strong power level 8 deck, so we really need to like look for a solid hand that can get on the board quickly. Mana Crypt is a great opener, obviously, same with Soul Ring. We're looking to get some fast mana on the board, we're looking to ramp out, and we're looking to build up some powerful lands that are gonna allow us to do some like really broken stuff. So we are running a pretty expensive land package. This is not an inexpensive deck, so look elsewhere if you're looking for a budget option. This is certainly not it. It's not this expensive. Like, this is all my fancy versions, and my regular viewers know that I'm a fan of the bling. But even if I were to update this to cheapest, it's going to be quite expensive. So unless you're proxying or have a big collection like me, this deck's probably not for you. So what lands are we looking to get out quickly? Well, Cabal Coffers and Urborg, because that's just going to allow us to like make a ton of mana, do very broken things. It turns all of our lands into swamps. We get tapped for that much mana. This is a black deck, so we're taking advantage of the broken black lands that exist. And then we've got some things like Alchemist Refuge, which is extremely good in this deck for the reasons I just described, allowing to cast spells at flash speed this turn. This can enable some very, very broken things. And then the other land, there's lots of lands in here. I'm not going to talk about all of them. They all do like interesting and unique things. But the one that I need to discuss the most is Eye of Ugin. This is very expensive right now, and for good cause. This card is busted. First of all, your colorless Eldrazi costs 2 less to cast. How good is that? It's insanely good. What it doesn't help with is casting Ulalek for the first time, because Ulalek does not cost any he does not cost any generic mana, and Eye of Ugin just reduces colorless Eldrazi by 2 generic mana. However, it will reduce Ulalek on subsequent casts if he dies, which he will. So next time he costs 7, but if you have an Eye of Ugin out, it costs 2 less. So it's like basically negates 1 instance of commander tax. So Eye of Ugin, great for that reason. Also great at like ramping out all of these other Eldrazi. I think it reduces the cost of almost all of them, including Wastegate Battle Mage. If you pay the blue kicker, it's going to be reduced by 2. And then everything else in the deck is reduced by it. That is an Eldrazi. So fantastic card. And by the way, if you overload Eldritch Immunity, that costs 2 less too, I think. Colorless Eldrazi spells you cost 2 less. Yep, so this is a colorless Eldrazi spell, so it does get reduced. So that's crazy. Same thing with Echoes of Eternity, right? This is the trigger doubler and the spell copier for colorless. If you have this and Ulalek in play, you're gonna win. But the extra good part about Eye of Ugin is that second ability, 7 and tap. Notice you don't have to sacrifice it, because yeah, this card's fair. 7 and tap, search for a colorless creature, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So this is great when you're just out of gas and you need to find some big answers, some beefy Eldrazi that can get you back in the game, draw you back up to 7, draw 4 cards, steal someone's best creature and kill them. All of this great stuff the deck can do. However, what you're going to be grabbing most of the time is actually not any of those. It's the simple, humble, little skittering cicada. Or Liberator versus Battle Thopter. They do the same thing. The secondary abilities are not as important, although I won't say they're unimportant, especially Skittering Cicada's ability is crazy. And, doubling this and casting a bunch of spells at flash speed that are colorless, which this deck can do, and this deck can make tons of mana, and it's not surprising to turn this little guy into a 30-30 and just knock someone out one shot with Skittering Cicada that they didn't even know you were going to play. Came in on end step and it's just like, wow. But, giving your colorless spells flash is really why we're playing these 2 cards and why you're going to want to get them out so quickly, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, once your Eldrazi spells have flash, things just get nuts. I'm going to do some mulligan practice later, so we're going to run through some actual examples and talk about how this might work. But trust me when I say this is not a deck to play at a low power table. People already don't like playing against Eldrazi, so just make sure that they know what they're up against. I'm not running any intentional infinites in here. I'm sure some exist, but I'm not about that, and I'm not looking to do that. I'm just looking to, old-fashioned win. Play a bunch of Eldrazi, copy them, copy their triggers, smash everyone for 1,000,000 damage, and make them sack tons of permanents and steal their turns and steal their creatures and, all the fair things that Eldrazi like to do. No big deal. Yeah, I mean, I think really this deck takes a lot of practice. I've played it 10 times now, and it's very, very hard to play. Surprisingly unassuming. I think a lot of people I've played against and with, when I've played against people playing this deck, I have not ever seen someone optimize it, even close to optimize it. Players just don't know how to play it, and it's a pre-con, so you can't blame people for just running it out there, because it doesn't seem like it's that complicated. But honestly, this is the hardest deck I've ever played, and I have yet, in the 10 games I've played, I've yet to come close to feeling like I've played optimally. Not even 50%. So if you like the idea of that, this deck with a very high skill ceiling, this is a good choice for you. So I'm just going to run through a few more things that I feel like are useful to talk about. Brunati, this deck really wants haste, and there are a lot of ways to get haste. We're playing 5 colors. The ones, I'm going to switch to types and tags here. So, in my deck list, if you go to the grouping and change to types and tags, you can see how I have this set up, and you can kind of see, a lot of spells are in multiple sections, so you're going to have to look through a lot of lists here. But I find this to be really helpful when deciding what to cut or what to add more of, or even in game when you're just trying to figure out what do I need? I have a demonic tutor in hand, what should I get? Sometimes switching to these types and tags can be very helpful for that reason, but it is a lot. I understand that this is an overwhelming thing to look at, so just use it if you like it. If not, don't. But here are ways of giving haste that I'm going with right now. I actually don't yet have this Eldrazi line breaker, but I think I will run it when I end up getting my copy. I think it's pretty good. Mainly, I'm just looking for more cheap Eldrazi spells, because once you've got flash speed with the ways I've mentioned, Alchemist's Refuge, Emergent Zone, and the 2 colorless flash enablers, you really just want these cheap ways to trigger the doubling with Ulalek. Most of the time, by turn 5-6, I'm having access to 10 plus mana, with even more every turn thereafter due to Urborg and Cabal Coffers interaction. So usually, you're going to have a lot of mana to play with, and it's just a matter of how do I do the most damage with the mana that I have available. So here are the ways we're playing to give haste. Rhythm of the Wild is especially good because, you know, giving your stuff uncounterable is really strong when you're playing huge creatures that you really don't want to get countered. Runati, this card is under the radar, I think. Really powerful. Basically, it's a little confusing, but, you know, what it does is it has a static effect. It doesn't even matter if you use the mana he makes for it. So, like, you can play this with Summoning Sickness and still trigger the haste effect by, you know, basically what happens is anytime you play a creature with mana value 7 or greater, is what it equates to, that creature will get haste. And the reason for that is, you know, it's the mana value minus 4. So if you take a 7 drop, for example, its mana value 7 minus 4 is 3. That's how many +1 counters it's going to get. Therefore, if you play a 10 drop, minus 4, it's going to get 6 +1 counters, so on and so forth. But really, 7's the magic number because 7 and higher will give it at least 3 +1 counters, and Runati states that creatures you control with 3 or more +1 counters on them have haste. So this is a very powerful effect because it not only buffs your huge creatures, but it gives them all haste as well. Lightning Greaves is a gimme. Probably should be running Swiftfoot Boots in here too. It's very hard to make room, but, you know, definitely slotting them in would not go amiss here. And Bitter Reunion, this is an interesting one. I actually put it in because I was looking for some discard outlets. I'm running the new Emrakul that has Madness, and I really just wanted a way to trigger that Madness, even though, like, you can normally just cast it, like, for its normal cost, whereas it's under Steel. Yeah, so, like, Madness is 6 colorless, which we can easily pay, but its regular cost is 12, which we can also usually easily pay. And this is an interesting one, actually. I had to ask in the judges chat about it because I was reading it and thinking, like, you know, copying these big Eldrazi that are legendary usually is not that helpful, but you do get to copy the cast triggers, right? With Ulalek, copying the actual body doesn't work because you're going to lose one to legend roll. And Emrakul here is actually a really interesting case because astute viewers may have realized this, but there's no way to prevent, if you cast Emrakul and Ulalek triggers and you say, yeah, I'm going to pay the 2 colorless, you're going to lose your entire board. Why? Well, you're going to get the cast trigger, right? Gain control of all creatures target player controls. You're going to get to double that, right? So Ulalek will copy that cast trigger, and you're going to steal player A's creatures, and you're going to steal player B's creatures, and you're going to laugh maniacally and be like, ha ha ha. And then you'll copy Emrakul, the world anew. And then what happens? Well, they're going to die to legend roll one of them. And then, oh, what's that last thing that Emrakul says? When he leaves the battlefield, sacrifice all creatures you control. Uh-oh. So, basically, Ulalek will steal 2 players' creatures, copy Emrakul, it's going to die to legend roll. That's going to trigger his second thing that says, oh, Emrakul left the battlefield, sack all creatures you control. So basically you're going to board wipe yourself and 2 other players, leaving 1 player stunned and grinning? I don't know. It's going to be the right play sometimes, but don't do it by accident. Thankfully I realized this before I ever did it, but you know, honestly, like, I don't think running this card is really even worth it in this deck. It's questionable, but I'm not cutting it because it's new Eldrazi. Come on. Anyway, I'm on a tangent here. Thanks for staying with me, and just quick digression, please like and subscribe and follow me if you haven't already. I really appreciate all of the positive feedback I've been getting. I know that I can be a bit long-winded and possibly pedantic at times, but, you know, if you're watching, hopefully that's why you're here, and hopefully I'm providing something to you that isn't available in other content creators' videos. At least I haven't found the level of sophistication and in-depth analysis and, like, real, like, sharp analytical, like, stuff that I look for. I find that a lot of videos out there are kind of very surface level. They're gonna, like, give you a list of the cards and they're gonna read them. Like, you know, I could read the card myself. I don't need you to sit there and read the text of the card for me. Anyway, thank you. I appreciate the feedback I've gotten from everyone, and please let me know if you like the videos, and let me know if you have any feedback too, because I'm still learning. I'm brand new at this, and I really appreciate the comments and the suggestions and the feedback, both positive and negative, that I've gotten from everyone. So thank you, and let's get back to the video. I don't know if there's like a ton more to specifically talk about. We're running a lot of mana, ramp. Really, like, I guess we'll talk about the ramp, because you think like in an Eldrazi deck, you're going to want to run like a lot of artifact mana, right? And I think like I've kind of shied away from doing that a little bit. I have the obvious mana sources like Mana Vault, Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, the big three. I'm not running in the Moxen because although I own them and they are very good and worth it, I just don't like playing them. I'm already pushing the limits of the power level 8 deck here. I'm not running any infinites, but I like to avoid playing the Moxes. Like, save that for EDH. Mana Crypt is already excellent. Let's just stick with what we have here. That being said, if you want to throw Moxes in a power level 8 deck, I think it's perfectly reasonable to do that. I just don't want to. Also, the reason I'm not playing the Rise of the Eldrazi, which is very good in this deck, and I think you could definitely run this. I just like to avoid playing extra turn spells because I want to win with a little bit more challenge, and I think that is a little bit easy mode sometimes. Just my opinion, though, and absolutely run them if you like them. So yeah, we're running like a few mana rocks, right? But really, like, the way I've chosen to go for my ramp in this deck is a mix of those mana rocks with the power of green ramp and the power of, like I talked about, of Cabal Coffers and these like very powerful lands like Ancient Tomb, Eldrazi Temple, all these lands that can make 2 mana, Eye of Ugin that can reduce your costs. Like, these are how you're really gonna like have a powerful turns, especially Cabal Coffers. Like, this is just the nuts. I mean, Cabal Coffers totally broken with Urborg. So we're running lots of ways to find it, right? Urza's Cave. I'm going to switch back to types and tags so I can show you all the ways in which you can find Urborg and Cabal Coffers, because that's going to be your top priority. That and getting out the One Ring, just to have a like very powerful draw engine on the deck, on the field, so like you're going to never run out of cards. I've actually never landed Kozilek's Unsealing. I don't think I've drawn it somehow in 10 games, but this seems so strong. Like, getting this or getting the One Ring is the way you're going to win games, in addition to finding Cabal Coffers and Urborg. So how can we find it? Well, we've got, let's see, how many ways? Crop rotation gets there, right? Expedition map. We've got Chittering Dispatcher. I just want to talk about this one real quick because it doesn't seem that good, but in reality, like, this kind of slides under the radar and is really good. It's just a 2/3 with Devoid. It's got Myriad, and when it leaves the battlefield, you create an Eldrazi spawn that sacks for a colorless. So the thing is, like, as long as you have an open attack where the 2/3 is not going to die, you just send this every turn. You don't care about the Myriad tokens if they get through or not, because they're going to die one way or the other. They're going to leave the battlefield, and when they do, you're going to make at least 2 Eldrazi spawn every single attack. And if you've got Ulalek out, you can copy that trigger potentially. If you've got the trigger copier, the Echoes of Eternity, or Roaming Throne, or God forbid you had both, you're going to get tons and tons of these little Eldrazi spawn tokens, which are really powerful. Like, each one's like a lotus petal in this deck, So these things are really good, and this is just I love seeing this card in my opener because it's the kind of setup play that like kind of like gets eyes off you, and I think like it very subtly wins games. This sort of card, it accrues advantage every turn. No one really cares. It's just like, oh, you're playing this like precon deck. This looks like a precon card. I wouldn't cut this card. I think it's very, very strong. Here's another one that I have not drawn in 10 games, but it seems really good to me. Actually, like, kind of wish it didn't have the group slug aspect to it, or does one to each opponent, because that's the kind of thing that just pisses people off enough that they might like attack you or remove this. which you really don't want them to do. You just want to be accruing these Eldrazi spawns every time you play a colorless spell. That's why I'm running this, you know. Yeah, and then other ways to find Cabal Coffers and Urborg. We've got Sowing Mycospawn. This card's great. Pay the Kicker if you can. It's really good to be able to exile someone's land. Knock off that Nykthos. Like, exile someone else's Cabal Coffers so they can't take advantage of your Urborg. Great, great card. And copying this with Ulalek feels real good. You get 2 land into play untapped. You get to exile 2 land. You pull that off, it just feels like you're on top of the world after that. Tempt with Discovery, one of my favorite cards of all time. If you're playing against this card, always say no. Always say no. Unless you're like in such dire situation that you feel like there's literally no other option. Anytime more than one person has said yes to this when I've cast the spell, I've won the game. Pure and simple. If everyone says yes, you get to fight 4 lands, they come in untapped. It's pretty hard to lose the game after that. And Open the Way, this card's just crazy good. It's already like kind of got into a like decently high price here. I'm surprised, I bought like 50 of these when it came out because it was under $1 and I was like, are people not reading this card? I don't get it. 6 mana and you get 4 land into play? Like, what? Yeah, resolve this card for 4 and tell me if you lost the game and how. This card's so good. And then we've got just like a couple of like general tutors. Do not be afraid to use these to find Cabal Coffers or Urborg or any land if you need it. Like, people are always like, oh, like complaining when they have to get land with one of these tutors. Like, I do it all the time. It lets you keep a sketchy hand that has like light on land. Like, these are, getting a land, there's nothing wrong with that. Land are really good, in case you haven't realized. So don't feel like you can't get land with these. In fact, it's what I do, I don't know, 60% of the time. We've got Expedition Map to find one of those pieces. We've got Urza's Cave. This land is sick. When people were asking me like, hey, this before the set came out, I got this question like several times, like, hey, what card are you most excited for from Modern Horizons 3? I would always say like Urza's Cave. The second I saw this card reveal, I was like, oh my god, thank you. I'm like obsessed with land decks, in case you haven't realized. I mean, check out my Necroblossom videos if you haven't already. And Beladros Witherbloom is one of my favorite commanders of all time. I just love land decks. I can't get enough of them. I feel like they're so powerful and so difficult to interact with. So yeah, love this land. Just the utility of being able to like go grab whatever you need. Just so good. And then Wargate. This is a card that I don't feel like gets enough attention. I think this card's really good. For 3 mana, you can get any land you want, put it into play untapped. So 3 mana, grab a couple coffers from your deck, put it in untapped. That's what I use this for almost every time. However, there are those games when you already have the coffers in play. You've got like, you're hellbent, right? You've got no cards in hand. You just need something. You draw a Wargate, then, well, that's a little bit different. That lets you get any permanent you want. Yeah, you have to pay a lot, but this gets you the One Ring, puts it right into play for you. You don't get the cast trigger? Who cares? You got a One Ring in play. It lets you get Shadow of the Second Sun. Maybe my second favorite card from Modern Horizons 3, and one that I also don't feel like it's getting enough attention. This card gives you an extra beginning phase at the end of your turn, so you go untap, upkeep, draw, first main phase, combat, second main phase, untap, upkeep, draw, end step. So gives all your creatures essentially vigilance because everything untaps on your end step. You untap all your lands on your end step. You get an upkeep, extra 1 on your end step, which can be good or bad. I've taken a lot of damage off the One Ring with this in play, I'll tell you what. But, you're also untapping the One Ring on your end step, so it's like, yeah, I'll take an extra damage. I'll take extra upkeep damage from the One Ring to be able to like draw with it again. Yeah, this card's so good. It's, unless it gets countered, it's kind of free to cast because, well, assuming like you have ways to play permanents on their turn, but like I mentioned earlier, this deck's playing a lot of ways to get flash, so this card's just really powerful in any deck that can utilize the mana on other people's turns. So, you know, fetching this out with Wargate is a great way to use 9 mana. Seriously, you will not be unhappy with that outcome, unless you get mana drained, in which case you'll be quite sad. Anyway, I think I've droned on enough here. I think you get the idea. Really, we're just trying to set up a powerful mana base with a draw engine, and then play some big beefy Eldrazi, copy them, and just do crazy Eldrazi shenanigans. So let's do some test hands and see if we can demo. Alright, so what I would encourage you to do if you haven't seen my videos before is please pause. Tell me, would you keep this hand? We're going to assume we don't know who our opponents are, so this is kind of just in a vacuum. Alright, I think this hand is insanely good. Like, I don't know if I can ask for much better. This is like the best opening hand I've seen in a long time. We've got the Urborg already. We've got a way to find the coffers right here. We've got another way to find the Cabal coffers. We have something huge to play that is going to do something very powerful. And we have a draw engine right here in hand already. This hand is bonkers. Let's play it out. Alright, we drew Hideous Taskmaster. This is like a steal one thing from every player and then attack them for a bunch with all those things and annihilator them. So just kind of a powerful effect. Really, really good to double this. You steal 2 creatures from each player. You get 2 of these in play that are 7/2s with Annihilator. It's like if you copy this with Ulalek, it just feels like they can't recover from that. So the question with this hand comes like, well, what do? Do we play Urborg and Vamp for the coffers? Or do we slow play it by like running out Mystic Remora, paying for it the first like 3 turns? Because we don't have any like, if we do that, we don't have to play till turn 4 with Template Discovery. So like, this hand's a little risky. Like, another option would be to like start with Urborg, Vamp for a Mana Crypt, draw that, and then tempt with Discovery on turn 2. I think that's probably the better play. That being said, if you're against opponents that you feel like probably aren't going to be that aggressive or fast, I think it would not be unreasonable to just run out Mystic Remora turn 1, and then pay for it turn 2, maybe even turn 3, and then let it die, play the temp. That's a very slow line, but you're going to draw a lot of cards, and it could set you up well by going that route. However, I think like in a vacuum, the most powerful play here is just start with Urborg, pass turn, wait till it's end step, Vamp. Let's get Mana Crypt. We don't have to reveal it. We're going to put it on top of our library. Whoops. We're going to close and shuffle. Then we're going to put it on top of our library. And we lose 2 life. I'm not going to bother with the life in the demo. And then pass turn. To our next turn. Hey, look, we drew a Mana Crypt. So lucky. Drop it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. Template Discovery. Who wants some? Smart opponents, seeing you have Mana Crypt and Urborg in play, are going to be like, hell no. But, God forbid, one of them or more gives you a land. You can see how nuts that would go here. So I would just assume in the purposes of testing that we're just going to get a single land. It's going to be Cabal Coffers, so we will put that into play. It comes in untapped, which doesn't really matter for us, though we can tap it for 1 black with Urborg, right? Spin that, we can't do anything else. We'll go to our next turn. We'll flip for Crypt, we'll take damage probably, because that's how it goes. Play the Alchemist Refuge. So now, how much mana do we have? We've got 1, 2. So basically, like, let's put the Mana Crypt with the coffers, because it's 2 to activate, right? So, like, we'll use the Mana Crypt to activate the coffers. Coffers will make us 1, 2, 3, 4 black, and then we can add 3 more on top of that. We don't have red, so we can't play the Hideous Taskmaster yet. But we could overload a Psych Rift on turn 3. I mean, should you want to do that? which is possible. You know, this is a power level 8 game. It's possible that there's a board state in which you need to do that. However, more likely is just run out the Mystic Remora and pass the turn. And just leave all this mana up. You can make a comment about how you have all this mana up just to scare people from attacking you. But in all honesty, you're probably just going to take some attacks here. That's fine. You've got 40 life, maybe you have 35 life because of Mana Crypt and Vamp, but so it goes. You know, you're going to draw at least a card, probably 2, maybe even 3 from Mystic Remora in this turn cycle. So let's just draw 1, just to keep it very conservative, because some people do play carefully around fish. But then we're going to go to our next turn, and we're going to pay the 1. So I'm not even going to... You can like turn off your draw when you go to your next turn. I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to say we're paying the 1. So we drew Thran Dynamo, we paid the 1. We didn't know that when we saw that. So unfortunately we didn't draw land, which is actually quite bad with ball coffers out, but you know, that's okay. We're set up really well here anyway. We've got not quite the mana to play this shadow, unfortunately. That's very sad. We need another blue. But that's okay. We're gonna run out the Thran Dynamo. We'll activate the coffers to make 1, 2, 3, 4. That's perfect. We play the Thran Dynamo, and we can't really do anything else. We're gonna draw. Let's draw 2 cards from the Mystic Remora this time, and then let's move to our next turn. And let's just say we're gonna let the fish go this time. I think the right play is to keep it out, but I'm just going to remove it for the sake of this demo. Okay, so here's a critical turn, right? We still haven't drawn another land, which is quite unfortunate. This 35 land deck, we've drawn 17 cards, so you know, on average we should have at least 6 land drawn by now, but so it goes sometimes. We could cast Windfall, however this hand is really good. I don't know if you noticed. I do not want to discard this hand. So I think, you know, we also don't have red to play our Hideous Taskmaster, which is pretty sad. So what are our options? Like, we can, how much, first of all, like, let's consider how much mana we can make. Coffers makes 4, right? So we've got the 4 here. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so I think we should have enough to play both our commander and the Echoes of Eternity, but we just need to make sure that we can produce enough of the correct mana. I'm quite sure that we can. The only problem with the coffers is it doesn't help you play Ulalek, right? Because it can only pay for 1 of the pips, the black mana. So, but fortunately we've got 3 colorless here, so I think like the 4 black we make from coffers, 3 of it can go toward this Echoes of Eternity, right? So we're going to do that. We're going to play the Echoes of Eternity. You know, if we had drawn like 2 more land, we could have played Ulalek and then cast the Echoes of Eternity and copied it. It's not legendary. We could have had 2 of these, and that would have been crazy. But that's not what happened, so let's talk about reality. So anyway, we pump 3 of our black into this, and then we pay the other 3 colorless using the Thran Dynamo, so we've got that out. We've got 1 black floating, and then maybe we don't have enough because of the Urborg. Yeah, because we can only put 1 black into this. That's sad. So I guess I misplayed. I suppose what I should have done instead is hold on to this Echoes of Eternity because we want to get 2 of them later. Might as well be as greedy as possible, right? And in this case, I think we don't want to activate the coffers. We just want to play our commander. We can use the 3 colorless and the 2 for Mana Crypt and just play him for 5 colorless. And then leave up this mana. We've got Fierce Guardianship in hand if we need it. And yeah, I think we're getting a little unlucky with our colors here, but that's okay. This is a great start. This is only turn, like, what is it, turn 5? So we've missed 2 land drops at this point, which is pretty unfortunate. You know, do we just Windfall here? I really hate to do it with this hand, but like, honestly, it really hurts to miss a land drop right now. I think it very much depends on what opponents have in hand. I'm going to do it just because I want, you know what, we're just going to do another. Alright, I'm going to walk us through a sample hand here and talk about some of the more complicated and more powerful interactions of the deck and kind of show you how those play out in person. So, as you can see, I've got the nice Ripple Foil Collector's Edition borderless Ulalek, which I think looks super sick. I know not everyone's a fan of this Ripple foiling, but I think it looks great, especially in person. It really pops. Even on this cam, it's not really representative of how amazing it looks in person, so big fan of this. Anyway, let's draw an opener. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll see if it's keepable, and I did set aside some cards that I'm going to be likely looking for with tutors just to kind of save time in this video. But oh, I see a Soul Ring. I see 3 land. Wow, this hand looks excellent. So I think we're going to keep this, but let's just really evaluate. I always encourage everyone to take time with your mulligan decisions. It's the most important part of the game and one that you have a lot of agency over. So just be very careful. Don't jump the gun. Don't feel pressured. Commander games take a long time. Spending an extra minute or two deciding on your mulligans, not the end of the world. And if anyone's pressuring you about that, tell them to F off. So what do we got here? Let's separate our land from our mana sources, and I'm going to scan all these cards for you guys so you can see them on the side here. So let's look at our lands first. We've got Eldrazi Temple, which makes a colorless or 2 colorless for Eldrazi spells or activated abilities. Notably, you cannot use this 2 colorless to pay for Ulalek's triggered ability because it's not an activated ability. So a little unfortunate, but that's okay. We're still going to make great use of this land. We've got a old school dual Tropical Island, blue or green mana, which are 2 of our 3 primary colors. I'd say green and white are the densest. However, blue is a close third, and as you can see in our opener, we've got green, white, and blue cards. We've got a City of Brass, which can make a mana of any color. Great. We've got a Soul Ring. I think everyone probably knows what that does. If not, maybe look it up. It's a good card. Sowing Mycospawns. This is a new Eldrazi. Love, love, love this card. For 4 mana, on cast, you get to find any land in your deck, put it onto the battlefield, untapped. If you pay an extra 2, you get to also exile someone else's land, so get rid of that pesky Nykthos, or Cabal Coffers, or Maze of Ith, or whatever's giving you a hard time, Glacial Chasm, whatever it might be, or, just knock out that blue player's open blue mana, and then move to combat so they are forced to use it, and they can't Swan Song your stuff. Yeah, this card's an overperformer in this deck for sure, as I think we're going to see in this opener. And then we've got Kior's Follower. This is a nice little mana dork that has a lot of added utility. You can tap it to untap any permanent, so stuff like the One Ring is a great target. And the nice thing is, I'm going to demo this too, but you can put this, Ulalek cannot copy mana abilities, but this technically is not a mana ability, and the reason we're running this over a regular mana dork is this can just give you 1 mana. Worst case scenario, you can untap your land, you can make another mana with it, right? Second best scenario is like untap a source like Soul Ring that's going to give you 2 mana instead of 1, so all of a sudden that's like better, right? But even better still is untapping something very powerful like Thran Dynamo, like the One Ring to get an extra draw trigger off it and add an extra burden counter. And with Ulalek, we can put this untap on the stack, copy that, choose new targets for the untap. You can see where this is going. I'm just going to say right now, there are a lot of opportunities to make this deck see EDH power or infinite. I'm not running any intentional infinites, but there are tons of ways to do it, and like untap effects are a really easy one. In fact, if you were to run something like Dramatic Reversal in this deck, which untaps all non-land permanents, I think. Yeah, so this spell, if you were to put this in your deck, all you have to do is put this on the stack, play an Eldrazi in response to trigger Ulalek. you create a copy of your dramatic reversal, and if you could trigger Ulalek again, so you get one Ulalek trigger on the stack, but you don't let it resolve. You respond by playing dramatic reversal, and then you respond to that by playing another Eldrazi, creating a second Ulalek trigger. This creates an infinite as long as you have at least, like it would be with this board with just these two cards, because I would untap these two at minimum each time, along with any other non-land permanents I would have. I'd have the 2 to pay for Ulalek's trigger again, and if you have an Ulalek trigger on the stack and you create another Ulalek trigger, it does copy that first one. So if you have one on the stack, you get another one, and you had infinite colorless mana somehow, you would have infinite Ulalek triggers, because you can always copy the original and keep creating a new one. And then if the dramatic reversal is also on the stack too, then you're untapping at least these two plus whatever else every time, and you can see how this gets out of control quite quickly. This is the reason I'm not running that card. I'm running a Frantic Search in here, which can kind of do the same thing. So, you can decide based on the power level you're looking for in your deck. I'm trying to push the top of 7, bottom of 8, where I'm running some fast mana like Soul Ring, but I'm not running things like Moxes, Grim Monolith, this kind of infinite, because I'm not looking to do that sort of thing. But if you are, certainly feel free to build it that way, and it's going to work. It's going to be very strong. And then to win with something like that, all you need to do is add in Thassa's Oracle, because you could draw your whole deck, right? You could add in any 1 damage ping, because if you're just copying that every time, then it could kill everyone. So there are a lot of ways to win with this deck. I'm going for just beatdowns with a big Eldrazi, because I think that's fun, and that's kind of what I want to do, but the sky's the limit with this deck. So anyway, didn't want to get off on too much of a tangent. Let's actually talk through this hand and see what this hand can do. So I'm going to play this out, and we'll pretend like we're in a game. I'm going to assume there's not going to be a lot of interaction, but if there were, if it was a real game, go figure, people actually want to play removal sometimes, even though I don't tend to see it that often. So let's draw for turn. Hey, we even drew the nuts opener. Oh my god. Okay, so alright, well, let's just play it out and be unapologetic about it, because, yeah, this hand's crazy. I mean, not every hand's gonna shape up like this, but, I still hope you see the power of this, despite me drawing the nuts here. So I'll play Soul Ring. So let's set aside our hand, over here. And we'll kind of put Ulalek off to the side. So I'll keep my hand over here, and we'll try to keep our plays on the left-hand side. So we've got our turn 1 Soul Ring into Arcane Signet, cue the table grumbling, as they should. I actually never draw this in real games, so go figure. And then we even have the nuts Arcane Signet into Enlightened Tutor to fetch any artifact or enchantment in our deck. And tell you what, we've got 4 mana on turn 1. I think I know what we're getting. Actually, I already have it out, like I said, so we're going to grab the One Ring, we're going to put it on top of our deck, and, half the table's going to concede. Or not. Untap, upkeep, draw. Hey, look, we got the One Ring. So what do we do here? I think we just play the One Ring, but let's just not rush our decisions here. We have a few options, right? We'll play our Eldrazi Temple, I think, for sure. This can make us 2 colorless toward an Eldrazi. So actually, yeah, this is a really good hand. Don't expect them to all look like this, for sure. But this will demo the power of this deck at minimum, even though it's a little unrealistic in terms of power level. So we could just play the One Ring, right? We've got 5 mana, we could do that. However, what we could also do is just play this Sowing Mycospawn first. I think this will work. Let's just make sure. So this makes 2 toward Eldrazi, right? This makes a green. And then I think we use the Soul Ring and float a colorless. So this would be 4 mana. So I'm not necessarily going to do this, but if we were to cast the Sowing Mycospawn, we can get any land we want, put it in, we'd have 1 colorless floating. So yeah, if we grabbed Ancient Tomb, we can get Ancient Tomb plus 2 mana, and then play the One Ring on turn 2 with a 4-drop and 2 mana rocks in play. Seems pretty good. Alternatively, we could go for a little more of a value play, and we could just play our commander right now. We do have the mana to do that, right? 2 colorless here, plus 2 here, plus 1. We even have a mana up after that, so that's an option. Or we can, let's see, we can't play the One Ring plus Kiyora's Follower. We only have 5 mana. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This can only make an extra for Eldrazi. We could play Sowing Mycospawn plus Kiyora's Follower. You know, I think just to demo what this deck wants to do more quickly, I'm just going to run out our commander. Let's just get that in play. I don't think that's necessarily the optimal play. I think the play I alluded to earlier with the Ancient Tomb into the One Ring is probably the best play. But for the purposes of this demo and just getting this rolling, I'm just going to run out our commander here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice his costs are all colorless / colored hybrid. So his cost can be played for 5 colorless, or it can be played for up to 1 of each Wooburg plus all the colorless. So the only thing that you can't use to play him is double colored mana. So if I had a Cabal Coffers and Urborg, which, you know, God willing I will in a turn or two here, that big infusion of black mana is not going to help you pay for Ulalek except for 1 pip, and then like hit commander tax and stuff later. So we'll run this out. I think that's fine for turn 2. Lol. So let's just move to our next turn here. So we're going to untap. We've got Ulalek in play. Hopefully he survives. We draw for turn. We drew an Eladamri's Call. Okay, so that'll be nice. We can use that to find one of the important pieces, which is going to be one of our flash enablers. So I'll show that in a moment. So we could play the City of Brass right now. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but before you rush to play a land in this deck, especially when you have draw in your hand, just make sure you consider what you're going to do for the turn. So take your time. Don't rush to play a land. I think we will, but let's just think about what we're going to do here. And really, like, I would encourage you, especially when you're new to this deck, take your time. Like, don't slow play the table. No one likes that. But this is a very complicated deck, so I would highly encourage you to goldfish it several times. Make sure you understand how the interactions work, because it is hella confusing. So what can we do here? I mean, we've got right now 2 for Eldrazi, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana available. So we could just play the Sowing Mycospawn with Kicker. That would be okay. We'd get 1 land, and we'd get to exile 1 land. However, I think what I would rather do is run out. I mean, see, I'm already confused, and it's turn 3. I think the most powerful setup play here, and the one that maybe will draw the least attention to you, believe it or not, is like just running out Kiyora's Follower plus the One Ring. You know, they already knew you had the One Ring, right? You tutored for it, so like this is not like new news to them, as scary as it is. And Kiyora's Follower, some players, good players, will realize how powerful and scary this effect is, especially in this deck. But, you know, the other alternative, which would be like playing Sowing Mycospawn with Kicker, which would exile someone's land. Don't forget this is turn 3. Exiling someone's land, not going to make you a lot of friends at the table, right? We could also play the Sowing Mycospawn without Kicker and pay Ulalek's trigger to double, to make 2 of these and get 2 land searches. Now that's pretty powerful, because so that's going to cost us all of our mana, right? All the mana we have out. Don't forget we have not played a land yet, right? So actually this makes 2 toward an Eldrazi, right? And then we've got green and we've got 1 more. So 4 mana for his cost. So yeah, let's make this play. I think this is the nice happy medium play. This way we're not exiling someone's land. We're going to play Sowing Mycospawn for its normal cost. And then we're going to pay, so we cast this, it goes on the stack, right? Then Ulalek says, hey, was that an Eldrazi spell? Yes, it was. Okay, do you want to pay colorless colors to copy all spells and activated and triggered abilities you control that are on the stack? Yeah, I think I will. I'll pay the 2 colorless. So we're going to get a copy of Sowing Mycospawn on the stack, and we're going to get a copy of his cast trigger. Search your library for a land, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. Okay? That is going to allow us, yeah, so we're going to make a copy of, let me get a copy token just so we know what's happening here. There we go. So we're going to get a copy of Sowing Mycospawn, and we're going to search for any 2 land we want from our deck, put them on the battlefield, then shuffle. I already have them pulled out because I know the ones we're going to go for, and they are Cabal Coffers and Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, which won't scan for me. So Urborg makes it so that all of our lands count as swamps in addition to their other types, and Cabal Coffers taps for 1 black for each swamp you control, but does cost 2 to activate. And unfortunately we don't have 2, we just have 1. However, if you recall, we haven't played a land for turn yet, so I think now is the time. We'll play that City of Brass, which can make a mana of any color, but we really only need it for colorless, right? So can we tap it for colorless somehow, or for black with Urborg to avoid taking damage? Normally you could, but City of Brass is actually a weird old one that says whenever it becomes tapped, it deals 1 damage to you. So unlike something like Mana Confluence, which you can get around the damage with Urborg, like if you see the difference here, this has an activated ability that says pay 1 life, add 1 mana of any color to your pool, but Urborg gives your lands this other ability, right? However, City of Brass has a triggered ability that when it becomes tapped, it deals 1 damage to you. So this is unavoidable, long story short, but that's okay. I think we're willing to take 1 damage here. So we're going to pay 2, and we're going to activate Coffers. That's going to give us 5 black in our pool, and we're going to use that to play the 1 ring. Again, this is turn 3. We've got 5 land in play, 2 artifacts, 2 creatures, our commander, and the 1 ring. Pretty good. So 2 cards in hand though only, but we do have the 1 ring out. So if you're an opponent in this position, it is #1 priority to answer the 1 ring. If they do, we're in a little bit of trouble, right? We've got only 2 cards left. I mean, we've got still a very powerful board, but don't forget this is turn 3, so it's pretty hard to have meaningful interaction at this point, or have held up meaningful interaction, at least when you think like, oh, it's just set up. But so let's press on. We'll tap the 1 ring, we'll add a counter, and we'll draw 1. We drew Cavern of Souls. Okay. So I think that's pretty much all we can do for this turn. We could attack with Ulalek, but wouldn't necessarily bother with that. You probably don't want to expose him in any way. So let's just go to our next turn, see how we do next turn. We'll untap all our mana, separate the land from the non-land here, and then we have an upkeep trigger, which is to lose 1 life for each burn counter on the ring. So we've got 1, we're going to lose 1 life. I guess I'll keep track of my life just so we understand how things are looking from that perspective too. Alright, so we lost 1 from City last turn, 1 from the 1 ring this turn. Alright, so we're going to draw for our turn. We drew an Ancient Tomb. Okay, good draw. As if we needed more mana here, but you know, we take what we'll get. So I think what we're going to start with is just I mean, we're going to draw with the ring, so unless someone had like Orcish Bowmaster's mana open and you thought it might be better to wait, then I think drawing on our turn is the smart thing to do here, just so we understand what all of our options are during our main phase. That being said, I think what we are going to end up doing is using Eldamri's Call to search up one of our 2 flash dorks, which is not dorks, but the powerful engines of this deck, which number 1 are Skittering Cicada, and number 2 is Liberator Urza's Battle Thopter. Both do the same thing, which is they give your colorless spells flash, and that really lets Ulalek go nuts because you can start to manipulate the stack in interesting and extremely powerful ways. So, but before we do any of that, so I mean, it's interesting because I guess like what it comes down to is we don't have any Eldrazi right now, so even if we had flash speed, the reason I'm hesitating is a lot of times before you use the ring, you want to consider like, do I have ways for Ulalek to copy the ring draw? Because that is very strong. It will add an additional burn counter and it lets you draw, double the cards. So I don't think we have a very obvious, at least that I can see, way of doing that right now. We could do it if we use Eldamri's Call to search for an Eldrazi that has flash, but I don't think we have any in this deck. So we're just going to draw natural. Add burn counter, draw 2. Next turn there'll be lots of shenanigans, and next turn's probably going to be the last turn I'm going to show because it's going to be nuts. So we drew Null Drifter and Glaring Fleshraker. So let's scan these for you guys so you understand what they do. Null Drifter, Glaring Fleshraker. Okay, so this gives us lots and lots of action. So I am just gonna... It would be at this point that I would probably just end my turn. One option is to play the Fleshraker and not bother copying it. I actually might do that because the thing is, I'm going to wait because we're going to end up with flash on our colorless spells, so I don't think we need to do anything during our turn. We could play a Cavern of Souls if we feel like it would be useful. Like if there's an opponent that is likely to have counter magic, by all means play the Cavern. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to play the Ancient Tomb so we have as much mana as possible. And I'm going to pass turn to my opponents and be like, oh, I'm flooded. Or, or not. Just like don't say anything. Let them assume what they want to assume. And then they'll take their turns. Maybe they'll run out some interaction, which might force your hand. But if not, when it's about to be your turn again, this is when the fireworks are going to go off. So you could attack with the Myco Spawns, by the way, on your turn, but I like just leaving them up as blockers here. These little points of damage could matter in the end, but honestly, like, we're going to be doing so much right now, and we might honestly just kill everyone with this Glaring Fleshraker. We'll see what happens. Okay, so it's the end step right before our next turn. We've got all of our mana up, the ring is tapped, but we can do a lot here. So let's start off by activating the coffers. I think that is going to happen regardless, and we'll just want to keep track of our mana somehow because this is going to be very complicated very quickly. Okay, so I've paid my 2 mana with Soul Ring to activate the Cabal coffers, which is going to give me 1 black mana for each swamp I control, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 swamps thanks to Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth. So we've got 6 mana in the pool. Great, good start. Now, what we want to do is cast the Eldamri's Call, because we can't really do anything else until that happens. So I think we'll tap the Arcane Signet for white, we'll tap the Trop for green, we'll cast the Eldamri's Call. And that's going to let us find any creature we want from our deck and put it right into our hand. We're going to find Skittering Cicada, which I have at the ready here, and that's going to go into our hand. Okay, so Skittering Cicada is not an Eldrazi, so we will pay 3 of our black, going down to 3. We'll cast the Skittering Cicada. Okay, We can't really do anything in response to that. Like, we have Eldrazi in hand, but we have no way of casting them at instant speed until the skittering cicada is actually in play. Okay? So, and I'm not going to keep track of the skittering cicadas plus X stuff this turn, because right now we're in the end step of an opponent's turn, so that power and toughness is not going to matter right now. But it will quite matter on your turn, so definitely don't forget to capture those triggers. So we've got the skittering cicada in play, we've got access to 3 black, plus potentially 2 more for Eldrazi, 2, so that's 7, 9, okay? Yeah, this is going to get real crazy, so buckle up. We'll start off by, I guess we'll just use the Eldrazi Temple, because why not? One thing you want to be cautious about is like using your colored mana first, because Ulalek's copy ability does take colorless, so just be really careful before you tap willy-nilly. Just be careful with how you're tapping. I have screwed this up a bunch of times, because right now, like, we've got these 3 black, these 2 lands can only make colored. So we've got this that makes 2 colorless, and we've got this that makes 2 colorless, but only for Eldrazi spells and activated abilities. This can't be used for Ulalek's trigger. So we have the Ancient Tomb to pay for Ulalek's trigger, but we have 2 Eldrazi's to trigger Ulalek's trigger. So we actually can't... Well, it depends. If we make some tokens with the Glaring Fleshraker, then we could. So I hope that you are understanding why I was saying earlier that like you really need to practice with this deck, because you can see already how complicated this turn is going to be, this interaction, and this is pretty small compared to what kind of board states you can get into later and what kind of stacks. So yeah, this is by far the hardest deck I've ever played, ever, no question. So good luck. I think for sake of like the brevity of this video, and I understand brevity is a relative term here, I'm gonna just focus on, we'll get just one Ulalek trigger here. Nah, screw it, we're gonna go for it. Alright, let's just start off with the Glaring Fleshraker. So I'm gonna cast this from hand. I'm gonna use Eldrazi Temple to make 2 colorless toward his cost, and then we'll use 1 of our black floating. Okay. Yeah, I think we'll be okay. We can evoke this instead of hard casting it, and that will be good. So, Glaring Fleshraker is on the stack now. It's not in play yet. And this is one of the problems, like, and the reason I considered playing this on our turn. You really want this to be in play before you start doing all your shenanigans, because you won't get these triggers otherwise. So I think we will put that on the stack, and Ulalek trigger goes on the stack. Now, we could just pay for the Ulalek trigger right now, if we wanted. We also have a Skittering Cicada pump on the stack, right? So our stack right now consists of Glaring Fleshraker, Skittering Cicada trigger, and Ulalek trigger. Okay? You know, you're always going to want to put the Ulalek trigger last, or first. You know, first to resolve. So meaning you're going to stack the Skittering Cicada thing first, and then the Ulalek. Unless you, for some reason, don't want to copy the Skittering Cicada and whatever your other cast triggers might be. So at this point, we've got the Ulalek trigger. We could just pay it, and we could copy this and this. However, another alternative would be to hold priority and continue to respond. Like, we could now put a Null Drifter evoke on the stack, which is an alternate casting cost. Alternatively, we can just let this stack resolve, not pay the Ulalek trigger, and then when we cast our Null Drifter, we can copy everything. I think we're going to go with that option, I don't know if it's the best option, it's just the one that I'm going to go with for sake of time here. So what I'm going to say is we get an Ulalek trigger, we're not going to pay for it, okay? We're going to let that drop, say no, we don't want to copy everything. We'll let the Flesh Raker come in, we'll let the Skittering Cicada get pumped. That's that. Now stack is resolved. We have priority again. Let's go ahead and evoke out this Null Drifter. So we're going to pay a blue, take a damage, and we're going to use our 2 colorless floating, and we're going to flash out Null Drifter, paying its alternate casting cost in Evoke. And for those of you who don't know what Evoke is, it's an alternate casting cost, so it still counts as casting, but it means that as soon as it enters play, a trigger is created that will cause you to sacrifice it. So you don't get to keep it. It like enters the battlefield and then you sack it. But you know, you can respond to that sack trigger and blink it or do stuff like that. That's, you know, the basis of those. You may have heard of the modern deck called Scam. That's kind of what that deck does. It plays evoke creatures and it like cheats them back into play. So we're not doing that right now, but we are going to do plenty of other stuff while this is on the stack. So what happens when we cast our Null Drifter for its evoke cost? Well, first of all, we have a cast trigger from the Null Drifter itself, which is when you cast a spell, draw 2 cards. We have another cast trigger in Ulalek, and we have 2 more cast triggers. We have Skittering Cicada, and we have Glaring Flesh Raker. So casting this Null Drifter created 4 cast triggers for us. 1, 2, 3, 4. We get to stack these however we want. What did I say earlier? We always want Ulaleks to go on the stack last, meaning it's going to resolve first. So the way I would choose to order things is like, well, what do we want to do first? I think the thing we want to do first is probably draw a card, right? So yeah, and then Glaring Flesh Raker's second ability, the one about dealing damage to opponents, this is about ETBs, so we're not even there yet, right? The Null Drifter will ETB eventually, but that might not be for a sec. Okay, and this is our hand. I'm just going to put it down here for now so it doesn't get in the way. And keep in mind, this is still on opponent's end step, so we're still going to get a whole turn after all of this finishes happening. So we're going to stack them just in order from left to right. So Ulalek's on the bottom, then Skittering Cicada, then Flesh Raker, then Null Drifter. So we cast Null Drifter, we draw 2 cards. And we'll go ahead and put the evoke of Null Drifter like on the bottom, like underneath the Ulalek. So it won't get copied by this Ulalek trigger, but that doesn't matter. It's still going to get sacrificed. It doesn't really matter where we put that, to be honest. But we probably want it to happen last, just so this is in play as long as possible in case we draw something that does something. So what did we draw? We drew Hideous Taskmaster and Runati Behemoth Caller. So Runati is not an Eldrazi, so we won't worry about that right now. But Hideous Taskmaster is, so this could matter if we end up having the mana to cast that, which we'll see what happens. So 1 trigger is resolved, right? Oh, actually, hold on. Man, I already screwed up. Sorry, I was supposed to do the Ulalek trigger first. I'm going to back up because I said it, but then I didn't do it. We're going to resolve Ulalek's trigger first, okay? So right now, all 4 of these things are on the stack, with the sacrifice being at the very bottom. So yeah, I screwed up what I said. We're actually are going to copy the sacrifice trigger off Evoke, but it doesn't matter. It's going to get sacrificed twice. That is irrelevant. So Ulalek's trigger happens first. So I'm going to pay the 2 life, lose 2, and we're going to copy all of these things. So now, not the Ulalek trigger, because that is resolving, but if we had a second one on the stack, it would get copied. However, now we've got 4 triggers that are getting copied. Skittering Cicada, so that's going to happen twice. Glaring Flesh Raker, so that's going to happen twice. And then Null Drifter, so that is going to happen twice. And then Itzhak, which is going to happen twice, but again, that won't matter. Let me see if I can fix the... There we go. Okay, so Skittering Cicada first, we cast a 7 mana spell. Even though we paid the evoke cost, it's still a 7 mana spell. So it gets +14/+14, naturally. No problem. It can't attack right now, so not a big deal, but still. I wouldn't even mention it because people are going to freak out. I mean, they should probably already be freaking out at this point. Now what's happening? this ability is getting doubled, right? We cast a colorless spell. We're going to create a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn creature token that we can sack for 2 colorless. So let me grab that token. Where is it? I don't know where it is, but we'll just use this Eldrazi token in the meantime to symbolize this Eldrazi spawn. It's not back. Sorry, this is going to drive me nuts. I'd rather just find the real one. Eldrazi, what is it? Spawn. Really? Wow, okay. I don't know where it is. So I guess we will use this guy. So we create 2 of these. Okay. So this flash trigger is very powerful. So this is actually creating 2 more triggers, right? So these don't just happen. So, or I'm sorry, these do just happen because they were at that point in the stack, but you know, these entering are creating 2 more triggers, which is whenever another colorless creature enters under my control, deals 1 damage to each opponent. So these 2 entering puts 2 of those triggers on the stack. Now, so that's going to happen before anything else, right? Because that's at the top of the stack. So those enter, everyone else takes 2, and then we continue down the list. So now we get to draw 4 cards, not 2, right? Because we've doubled this, so this is happening twice. So we're going to draw our 2, and then we're going to draw 2 more. Where's this incubator? Okay, that's crazy. So, and then this is going to get sacrificed twice. And we're also going to get, we're going to end up with 1 null drifter, 1 real null drifter, because one thing that I forgot when I was explaining what happened is we also made a copy of null drifter, right? Null drifter was on the stack with paid for with the evoke cost, and so was its cast trigger to draw 2. The copy we make of null drifter, even though we evoked it, is going to come in as a normal creature and it won't get sacrificed. So we're going to end up with a copy of null drifter in play. This one's going to get sacrificed and go to the graveyard, but we will end up with a null drifter copy on the board. So let's just draw that up real quick. Actually, I'm just going to use this one for sake of time, and we'll just remember that this is a copy, which I don't think is going to end up mattering because we're just going to win on our turn quite easily, I think. So what do we do now? I think the stack is resolved fully at this point. We've done 2 more damage to everyone because the null drifter natural and the null drifter copy both ETB'd. Notice we don't get another draw 2 because that's on cast. But Ulalek did copy the cast trigger, which is why we got to draw 2 extra. Hopefully that makes sense. If you're confused by any of this stuff, or if I made a mistake, please mention in the comments. I'm doing my best here, but this is, as you can tell, quite difficult to play here. So still on opponent, it's still opponent's end step. We've got potential of 3 mana open here. What else can we do? Well, we can't play our Eldrazi because it costs 7. But what we can do is flash in this Urz's Incubator. I think that we should do that because it's going to really, as if our next turn is not enabled enough, this is really going to put the nail in the coffin, so to speak. So let's pay 1, 2, 3, sack these guys, and we'll cast with flash again because Skittering Cicada gives all of our colorless cards flash, not just creatures. So on end step, we're going to cast the Urz's Incubator. We're going to name Eldrazi. That's going to create some triggers for us, mainly the Skittering Cicada one. Also this Glaring Fleshshaker trigger is going to make us 1 more Eldrazi spawn token. We will not get another Ulalek trigger. This is not an Eldrazi spell. Even though we're naming Eldrazi, that does not trigger Ulalek. So I think that is all we can do on opponent's end step. So I think we're ready to go to our turn. If your opponents haven't scooped or killed you at this point, I meant you in real life, not you the player, then good opponents. And please be gracious if you're taking as long as I am in your actual game, which you shouldn't do. So let's go to our turn. We're untapping, we're upkeeping, we're losing 2 life from burn counters off the ring, going to 33, and let's draw for turn, and then we'll take a look at what's in our hand. And I'll kind of move this stuff over. Draw for turn, we drew Thran Dynamo. So I'm going to make sure that I scan everything that's in our hand here so everyone understands what our options are and what we're going to do this turn. So we've got Runati Behemoth Caller, who's a mana dork, but mainly we play him for this ability where any creature spell we cast, mana value 5 or greater, gets X+1 counters, and creatures with 3 or more counters have haste. So this means that 7 drops, 7's the magic number with Runati, 7 drops enter with 3 counters, and they have haste. So very important to know with him. Excellent card, very underappreciated card, I think. Ultra powerful, especially in a deck like this. You can almost think of it like a Surek and Goreclaw, I think it's called. But like, compare Surek and Goreclaw, which cost twice as much mana at 6. It gives your other creatures trample, which is pretty nice. And it makes it so that non-token creatures enter with a +1 counter and get haste. You know, if you're playing 7 drops, Runati makes it so they enter with 3 +1 counters and have haste. He doesn't give trample, but he costs half as much mana, and he makes mana himself. So in decks that want to play 7 drops, Runati is just such a powerful card. I really, really like it. Okay, so we've got Runati, we've got Kiora's Follower, which I talked about before, which I don't think we're going to end up getting to play. This is a card you want to set up early because we don't have a lot of ways to give haste. Like, we don't have any Lightning Greaves or something in hand right now, so I'm not sure if we're going to get a chance to play this. And then we've got 2 land, an Alchemist Refuge, which gives our spells flash, which very powerful. Kind of does similar work to what the Skittering Cicada is doing, but it could let us play all of our stuff at flash, which can definitely matter. Or if you don't have a way to find the Skittering Cicada, we do have a lot of ways to find land in this deck, as you saw earlier when I found the coffers in Urborg. So this is our hand. We've got Hideous Taskmaster, which is big Eldrazi. What the heck? I don't know why it's in a different language here, but I'll just read to you what this guy does. Basically, when you cast it, it's a 7 mana 7/2 with Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1. And when you cast it, for each opponent, gain control of up to 1 target creature that player controls until end of turn. Untap them, they get Trample, Haste, and Annihilator 1 till end of turn. So it's a triple threaten on your opponents, 1 per opponent. You steal 1 of each of their creatures. All those creatures get haste, trample, they untap, and they get Annihilator 1. Huge board swing. This card's going to win you a lot of games, including this one. And then we've got a couple land. We've got Thran Dynamo, which honestly can like make us net positive mana if we copy it with Ulalek, so we will probably do that. So what do we want to do here? Think about it yourself and see if you come to the same decision as me. Well, I think like the first thing we want to do, we obviously want to play a land, but we've got the One Ring, right? So we could draw first. However, now that we've got Ulalek in play with the One Ring, we can copy the One Ring draw trigger. So, you know, I don't think we necessarily want to draw, see what we get, and then decide what to do. Rather, I think like the right play here is to actually play a land first. So we'll play whichever one. We'll play the Alchemist Refuge if we can. If we feel like we need the Cavern, we should play the Cavern. Even if there's a like very small chance opponent has a counter, I think we want to play the Cavern. So I'm going to play the Alchemist Refuge just in case it matters for the purposes of this demo. And then I think the very first thing we're going to do is activate the ring. So we're going to tap the ring, and we're going to put a trigger on the stack, which is the ring activating. Actually, sorry, I just want to back up one more step. The very first thing I'm going to do is activate the Cabal Coffers. Now, recall what I mentioned earlier about like using your colored mana versus colorless mana. So I think my default tendency would be to just group the Soul Ring with the Cabal Coffers. So, you know, boom, that 2 can go to activate the coffers. Great, we're all good, right? However, don't forget that colorless mana is at a very big premium in this deck, so I think we actually want to leave that back. Urborg is our least useful land in terms of how it taps, because it can only make black. All of our other lands can make black. I think that is our least useful land here, so we're going to tap that, and then let's tap the... It's so hard to even know. We have we have only 2 colored mana sources plus the Arcane Signet right now, right? I actually think we have enough colorless, so I am going to use another colorless source because I don't know if we have a better option. And we've got the spawns we're going to make, so I think we're okay. So let's tap 2, let's activate coffers. That's going to make us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 black. Okay, I'm going to have 7 black here. And I'm actually going to get a piece of paper, believe it or not, to kind of keep track of what's going on with these triggers. So, and you'll see why that's going to matter in just a moment here. So the first thing I want to do is play Runati. And we're actually just going to let that resolve because I don't want to copy it anyway, it's legendary. And I want to ensure that this is in play and doing its thing before we get rolling on our craziness. So we're going to pay a green, we're going to use 2 of our black here, we're going to cast Runati. We're going to let that resolve, boom, good there. Okay, so now what? So now is when we start off with activating the ring. So we're going to put a ring, tap the ring to draw a card, add a burn to add a burn counter, then draw that many cards. That trigger is going to go on the stack. Let me get a marker. Okay. So this is going to be the stack from bottom to top. So number 1 is tap, and I'm going to use some acronyms here, tap the 1 ring, okay? So this is going to be on the stack, but we're not going to let that resolve yet. So I'm not going to add the burden counter, I'm not going to draw yet. I'm just going to know that this is on the stack, and I'm going to inform my opponents that I'm going to hold priority and continue to take some actions before we let anything on the stack resolve. So tapping that does not create any other triggers, so there's no other things we have to do. So we're going to respond to that tap by, I think we'll cast the Thran Dynamo now. So we can flash it in. Don't forget we've got the Skittering Cicada, right? So let's put the Thran Dynamo on the stack. We'll use our black mana for that, going down to 2. Or sorry, going down to 1, because we had 5. And then Thran Dynamo is now on the stack as well. So number 2 is going to be, I already spelled it wrong, Thran Dynamo. Okay, so that's on the stack now. Okay, so now what? Well, we've got 2 things on the stack that we would like to copy, but before we can do anything else, we cast a colorless spell, right? So that does not trigger Ulalek. This is not an Eldrazi spell. It does, however, trigger Skittering Cicada, Glaring Fleshraker, and that's it. These 2 don't matter. So we're going to add these to the stack, right? So I'm going to say, let's put some acronyms here. SC equals Skittering Cicada. Let's do GF equals Glaring Fleshraker, and RUN equals Runati. And then we'll do UL equals Ulalek. TOR equals the 1 ring. Alright, this will be useful for the purposes of this list because it's going to get confusing. So we cast Thran Dynamo, what triggers? Skittering Cicada, SC, and what else? Glaring Fleshraker. GF triggers. Okay, so those are on the stack now. We still don't have an Ulalek trigger though, right? That's what we really want here. So how do we get an Ulalek trigger? Well, conveniently, we've got this Eldrazi sitting in our hand, so why don't we cast that? So let's remember that we have an Urza's Incubator in play naming Eldrazi, so this spell costs 5 instead of 7. Can we tap the Thran Dynamo? We can't. It's on the stack, don't forget. So can't use that, but we can use our black floating, so that's 1. We're going to need a red, so let's use Arcane Signet. That's 2, so we just need 3 more mana. So let's go Eldrazi Temple, 4, 5, or sorry, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and we just need 1 more. Let's leave 1 colored up, and let's just use Soul Ring. We'll end up floating a colorless here. Okay, so we've got the 5 mana for this spell. We're going to put it on the stack. Putting Hideous Taskmaster on the stack. Okay, so on the stack goes Hideous Taskmaster plus its triggers. Right, so it's got a cast trigger, which is when you cast it, for each opponent gaining control of up to 1 creature they control, they gain an Annihilator, yada yada yada. So this guy's on the stack, the actual spell, and its triggers are on the stack. So are we done? I don't think so. So what happens when we cast Hideous Taskmaster? We have a bunch of triggers, right? Now we've got Ulalek, Skittering Cicada, Flaring Fleshraker, because this is a colorless spell, even though it's got red in its cost, it's devoid, so this is a colorless spell. Null Drifter doesn't trigger. In fact, I'm just going to move Null Drifter down here because I don't think it's going to matter for these purposes. We've got Runati, right? This is a spell that costs a creature spell with mana value 5 or greater, so Runati triggers. And anything else? No. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 triggers on the stack in addition to its own stuff. So I'm just going to add these cast triggers. So we're going to say cast triggers. We've got Ulalek, Skittering Cicada, GF, and Runati. So all of this stuff is still on the stack, in addition to our tapping the 1 ring, which is all the way back down at the bottom there. Okay, anything else we want to do at this point before we start to let this stack resolve? I don't think so. I don't think there's really anything else we can do. So now let's work in backwards order and see what's actually going to happen. So these 5 cast triggers, we can order these however we want. These all were created at the same time, so we can choose how they're going to resolve. So I think the important thing to remember is we always want to resolve Ulalek first. I mean, not always, like there may be times where you don't want to copy some things and then you might choose to have them resolve first, but as a general rule I'd say like make sure to resolve your Ulalek trigger first. So let's do this Ulalek trigger, and I'm going to cross some things out as soon as we resolve them. That way we're clear of what's remaining to resolve, and I'm going to use some different colors here to indicate like where we're getting additional triggers because of Ulalek. So this Ulalek trigger is what's happening right now, right? Do we want to pay the 2 colorless to copy all of this stuff? I wonder. I think we will. Let's do it. So let's pay 2 from Ancient Tomb. Oh no, we have to take 2 damage. Whatever will we do? And what does that do? Well, let's read Ulalek again. When you cast an Eldrazi spell, which we did, copy all spells you control, then copy all other activated and triggered abilities you control. You may choose new targets for the copies. Okay, so we paid the 2. What happens? We're getting times 2, 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 times 2. Okay. Well, that's that. Let's move forward. Now, all of these copied triggers that Ulalek just created actually have to resolve first before we can do all of these things. So we're going to have to run through all of these instances, and then we're going to go back to the bottom and run through all of them again. So yeah, let's just get to going on it. I might just wrap this up at some point, but you know, you could see where this is going. So all right, Skittering Cicada. It's gonna get, so I guess I should have kept track of what triggered the Skittering Cicada so we know how big it's gonna get, but what triggered it here was the Hideous Taskmaster, so it's going to end up getting +7 from this one. So let's just keep the Skittering Cicada's power down here. So right now it's getting +7. Okay, so that one's done. That one's done. Now we're doing Glaring Fleshraker. Okay, so we cast a colorless spell, we make an Eldrazi spawn, which creates a trigger for itself to do 1 damage to everyone. So I'm going to keep track of the Glaring Fleshraker damage triggers down here. I'll just use some tally marks. Okay, so far we've got 1. And that one is done. And now we're going to do a Renati. We cast a creature with mana of like 5 or greater. It's going to get +3 counters, and that's it. So that's resolved. That one's done. Now we're going to Hideous Taskmaster and its triggers. So we're going to resolve its triggers first, which is we're going to steal one creature from each opponent. So let's say we do that. And that triggers are resolved. And then our Hideous Taskmaster comes in. That resolves. When that comes in, that triggers the Glaring Fleshraker because we had a colorless creature enter the battlefield, right? So we're going to get another ping on everyone. Okay, and then I feel like I might have missed something, but this is very difficult. And then we'll go to step 3. Skittering Cicada and Glaring Fleshraker triggers. So we've got the Skittering Cicada, it's going to get +4 because that was the Thran Dynamo, right? So +4. And then we've got the Glaring Fleshraker, it's going to create us another Eldrazi spawn. That's going to give us another Glaring Fleshraker damage. Those are done. And then Thran Dynamo is going to enter, finally. Okay, I don't think that gives us any triggers. This is only when colorless creatures enter. So we've got a Thran Dynamo in play now. That's done. And then finally, the One Ring first instance will happen, which is going to add a burden counter to it and draw us 3 cards. We drew Dol Amroth, Shadow of the Second Sun, Sanctum of Ugin. So I don't think any of those are going to matter right now. We're just going to move back to the bottom of the list, right? We did one of these. And now we're going to start over with this Skittering Cicada trigger again. It's going to get another +7, right? And then, so that one's done. Now we've got Glaring Fleshraker. That's going to make another guy and do 1 to everyone. Okay, now we get another Renati, so this is yeah, so we're going to make a copy of Hideous Taskmaster. It's not going to get any +1 counters because Renati says when you cast a creature spell, that enters with the additional counters. So the ability that we copied was the one giving this the counters, so this is going to get 3 more counters. But the copy is not going to get any counters. I'm pretty sure that's right. So that one's done, that one's done, and now we're going to move to the second Hideous Taskmaster. We're going to steal another creature from each opponent, so we'll end up with each opponent's 2 best creatures that were targetable. Okay, and then we're going to get another Hideous Taskmaster, so we're going to make a copy of that guy. Like I said though, this one is not going to get any of the +1 counters because that's only on cast. But we will have a second Hideous Taskmaster. So when that enters, we get another Glaring Fleshraker trigger that's going to do another damage to everyone. And then that's done. And now we're going to do the Skittering Cicada and Glaring Fleshraker triggers that were copied from the other Thran Dynamo. So this is going to be +4. This is going to be another one of these things, another damage to everyone, and then finally we'll get our second Thran Dynamo. So I'm just going to put a die on here to indicate that we have 2 of them. And then lastly, we're going to get another ring trigger. It's going to add 1 more burden counter, and we're going to draw 4. 2, 3, 4. We drew Emrakul, Deflecting Swat, Teferi's Protection. Yeah, so that's the deck. We're going to go to combat at this point, and we're going to send a 13-8 Trample Haste Annihilator 1, a 7-2 Trample Haste Annihilator 1, and 6 other creatures that we stole, plus Null Drifter, Skittering Cicada, which is a 24-24. Yeah. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Enjoy the deck. Good luck. Let me know how it goes for you. I I wish you the best of luck. This is very fun, but also very, very intensive and hard to play. So, as you can see, it can do some crazy powerful stuff though. So, best of luck. Let me know how it goes for you. Let me know all of the triggers I missed, because I'm sure there were many, or the mistakes I made. I love to hear from you, and just, yeah, let me know how this deck's playing for you. It's been a lot of fun for me. Good luck.